this episode of the Naturist Living Show, Dressed to Kill, the second edition.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show is brought to you by Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. At Bear Oaks, we offer traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Free your body, free your mind. www.bearoaks.ca.
Welcome, dear listener, to episode 103 of the Naturist Living Show. My name is Stéphane Deschênes, and I am your host for this podcast and the owner of Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. And I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad that we have the new site, as I mentioned in previous episodes. And I'm hoping that you, as a passionate listener, as a regular listener, perhaps for the last maybe 10 years that we've been doing this, are continuing to support us and support the movement. And I hope you will take some time to go and review it. If you're listening on iTunes, you can go and write a review. If you're listening in any other podcast catcher or service, and you want to write a review or rate us or both, that would be fantastic because it will help us spread the word. Also, if you want to share on social media your favorite episodes, that'd be fantastic. So thank you for being there. Thank you for continuing to support us. We are now on Spotify. So for those of you who would like to listen to Spotify, you can also listen to us there. So I think we're now in every major place you can find us. If there's one where we're not and you'd like us to be, just drop me a note, and I'll make sure to see if there's any way to add us to that platform as well. Going way back in 2012 for episode 45, I did an episode on health. It had a number of issues where clothing or lack of clothing could be good for your health. And one of the people that we talked to is Sidney Ross Singer, about Dressed to Kill, the 1995 book he wrote, where he found a link between breast cancers and bras. And he found actually that the women who he studied wore their bras 24 hours a day were 125 times more likely to have breast cancer compared to bra-free women. It's a correlation, and he's the first one to say that, and a lot of people have jumped on the fact that he is theorizing on the link and the reason why that may be, which is the lymphatic flow. But he's always clear in the book and when he speaks that that's just his theory as to why it could be. What he's talking about is a correlation. And they'd be the first ones to say that they're actually not medical doctors or medical researchers. What they do, their field is applied medical anthropology. So they research and try to understand cultural causes for disease. And of course, wearing a bra is a very cultural thing. It doesn't actually have a purpose. But the reaction was very interesting because people were very strongly opposed in many cases, emotionally upset by the concept, and they refused to consider the results. He was suggesting more research should be done, but people dismissed the book out of hand without even really debating it or doing any more research. The American Cancer Society even took the unusual step of issuing statements of complete condemnation without really doing any studying of what he'd done or trying to repeat it or disprove it. There was one study that was done, but there was a whole bunch of other studies that came out in support. So they decided to, in 2018, so this year that I'm recording this, to publish a second edition. And of course, I've been in contact since then, and I wanted to carry the book at Bear Oaks, of course. And we talked about the new book, and it was interesting because still, even to the second edition, there was a lot of opposition for it coming out again, and I can't understand it because I'm not 100% convinced that his conclusions, or his theory rather, as to why there's that link. is valid, but it's definitely interesting and something to look at. And the fact that there was so much opposition to the first one, and now even to the second one, is interesting. Even his publisher was threatened if he published a book, which is interesting, because why would anybody want to even stop the issuing of a book? I mean, it's a big market. I'm not suggesting that the bra industry was specifically attacking him. There was no evidence of that whatsoever. But it is a $30 billion U.S. industry, according to Transparency Market Research. Or rather, sorry, it's projected to be a $30 billion U.S. industry by the end of 2025, because it keeps growing. For a device that's really not useful for most women, other than if you want to shape or reshape the breast in a unnatural form, I suppose, or hide the nipple. And we've talked a lot in the past as to why you wear a bra to emphasize the breasts but hide the nipples. And if you see nipples through the shirt, or to shape them rather, that's a bad thing. But to enhance the breast, to make them more prominent, it's a good thing. And then, none of it makes any sense. So the book includes actually the story about the incidents on the threats that the publisher received. It also includes a number of additional pieces of research, additional historical references, advice from the British Medical Association that bras are the leading cause of breast pain anyway. Numerous additional studies that weren't in the first edition that support some of his observations. A 96 follow-up study by the authors in Fiji, some relevant research from New Zealand and Australia, and examples of industry resistance to the link since the first edition, and some of the sometimes rather nasty things that they encountered. And what's interesting in particular is Wikipedia in this whole thing, because I decided to go and update Wikipedia. Neither Sidney Rossinger or Soma Grismaijer are particularly adept at Wikipedia, and I've done a number of edits in Wikipedia, and I maintain a few pages here and there, or I maintain updates to the pages, and I've done updates here and there. So I knew what I was doing, and I decided to go through what I thought was a fairly biased article, biased against them. Wikipedia is supposed to be an encyclopedia and supposed to be objective, and it had all kinds of language that was not objective. So, for example, the introduction talks about a 1995 book that proposes a link between breast cancers and bras. But it doesn't mention that a study was done at all. It just says it proposes a link, as if they just made it up. It says that Singer and Grismaijer claim to have examined all these women. That's an interesting word, claim. I mean, they have no reason to not believe they did the research they did. The book says they did. Why they would use claim is strange. In the same sentence, the one editor said the data presented in the book have never been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Okay, fair enough. They published it in a book instead. And in that same sentence, they say, and researchers identified a number of methodological flaws in the author's claim. And they're the sources in New York Times. Now, this New York Times is a fine paper, but it's also not a peer-reviewed journal. So if you require a peer-reviewed journal, then you can't cite the New York Times or vice versa. So anyway, I did a few really minor edits because I didn't want to get into a position of taking a side that it was valid or not valid. I tried to remain as objective as possible, as I always am in my articles. And yes, and as a side note, people have asked me why there is no entry for me and why I haven't put it in, because that's not objective. I would never. It's up to somebody else if they think I'm worthy of an entry in Wikipedia, not me, to go and put that there. I think it's also very specifically against their rules to do that. I know a lot of people do for self-promotion. They go and produce their own entry in Wikipedia. But I've always tried very, very hard to follow the rules and to be as objective as possible. So I'd made changes to take away some of this language, which was clearly biased. And it was amazing how quickly it was reversed. There was a few people who are watching that page very, very carefully and refuse to allow anything to be changed and insist on maintaining the bias towards discrediting them. I mean, I did manage to get a few things in there because they were just factually incorrect. For example, it said that the book was self-published. One reprinting was self-published, but the original edition and the current one were published by a publisher. Not that that necessarily makes a difference, but that mention was clearly intended to further put them down and take away any credibility that they might have. And what's very interesting is if you look at the history, a number of people have tried to make this article more two-sided, to present both sides, to be more objective. Specifically on July 28th of 2018, an editor, put in 18 studies that supported the book, and obviously spent a lot of time writing it. And a mere 2 days later, they were all deleted. One giant deletion of the entire new edition of those studies. And the only rationale was that none of the sources were valid, except clearly some of them were valid. They weren't the British Medical Journal or the New England Journal of Medicine or anything like that, but some were published in China and some were published in Africa. And, it suggests to me perhaps that there is a bias in the at least in Wikipedia, or at least with those editors, against anything that's not in the Western world. I don't know why they were just out of hand, single-handedly all this deleted. So it really shows you that Wikipedia is really a good place to start, but you can't count on it to be the final resource, because it's only as good as the people who do it. It's me and it's other people who put it together. And if a topic has been taken over by a special interest group and there's nobody fighting them, those pages can become very biased in one direction or the other. And there's lots of articles that have been written about that. So it's a place to start for research, but don't necessarily count on it as being the be-all and end-all. So at any rate, all that to say, an interesting book. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying there's a lot of questions, a lot of information in there that's really interesting. So, of course, I had to have this discussion with Sidney Rossinger and Soma Grismaijer, and we did an interview in the spring when the book was launched, and specifically in order to share it with you. So it's nice to talk to you guys again. I'm very excited that you have a second edition of the book. For the listeners who are new to this, because maybe they didn't read the first book or didn't hear the first interview that we did, can you give us a summary of how you came to write this book and what it's about?
Sure. Well, I'd start by saying, what we do professionally. And we're applied medical anthropologists. And what that means is that we use the fields of medicine, biochemistry, and anthropology in order to study how our culture gives us bad attitudes and behaviors that lead to disease. So we coined the term culturogenic disease, and that means culture caused. And we are pioneers in this field. We started the Institute for the Study of Culturogenic Disease. And this, way back in the 90s, we got into the breast cancer field because Soma developed a lump in her breast. And while we were in Fiji for a completely different issue, and she was pregnant at the time, I'll let her tell that story. And this is how we became involved in the breast cancer field.
Well, it began while we were doing field work on a very remote island in Fiji. And I guess bras had never really been used or seen there. I was hanging up a couple of bras on the line when a young Fijian woman came over to me and asked me what they were. And I said, well, they're brassieres. And, well, why do you wear them? And I had to try to explain why I wore them. It was sort of a strange concept because I never really thought about it before. It was something that you just do as a woman in the West, in the Western cultures. And then she came over and felt it and sort of stretched it out and said, well, isn't it tight? And I said, I guess so, but you just get used to it. And that was the end of that. But then about a week later is when I discovered this very scary large lump in my breast, and which sent us back immediately to the U.S. to figure out what to do about it. Since I was pregnant, I didn't want to go in immediately for x-rays and so forth. And since we did medical research, we thought, let's look into this and figure out what's going on. Well, the first thing upon getting home, I took off all my clothes for a much needed shower, and we looked at my breasts and noticed these deep red grooves around my breasts, as probably every woman who wears a bra has had and always has, and never really thinks about it or questions it. But now we started to question it.
So that conversation with that girl about, isn't it tight, sort of came back into our minds, and we thought constriction. And the first thing that gets constricted, of course, is the lymphatic system. Mm-hmm. And that, which is in the news right now, because, I mean, medicine is pretty much in the dark on a lot about the lymphatics. In medical school, we had very little training on them. It's really your immune system. And while everyone's aware of the lymph nodes that we have, and for the breast, most of the lymph nodes that serve the breast are mostly in the armpit. What happens is this is your immune system, and in the tissues, your cells are basically bathing in fluid. And this lymph fluid drains into these tiny microscopic vessels called lymphatic vessels that begin in the tissue spaces. And these tiny vessels have one-way valves, so that the fluid moves in one direction towards the lymph nodes. The lymph nodes then pick up this fluid and detect any viruses or bacteria or cancer cells. And if there's anything that needs an immune response, the lymph nodes produce white blood cells. The node swells and gets tender, and that's when you know you're fighting an infection or something. And that's how your immune system detects problems in your tissues from this lymphatic drainage. And ultimately, the fluid returns to your bloodstream. But if you compress the body, these lymphatic channels are impaired. They're supposed to drain with no gravity, with no pressure. And any movement of your body, deep breathing, the movement of your muscles, that helps propel the lymph forward. But if you're wearing tight clothing, it interferes with this movement of lymph. Now, why would that be a problem? If you don't have your cells draining, having a constant flow of fluid, then the cells can't get nutrients delivered to them properly from the bloodstream.
You get stagnant.
Yeah, it's stagnation. And they're sitting in their own waste products. And then all the toxins you take into your body from our polluted world and our polluted air, food, and water, that courses through your body and has to be flushed out of the tissues, but can't be adequately flushed out if your lymphatics are blocked, because that's a major channel for their removal from the tissues. So you essentially are progressively congesting the tissues. And that was so it made sense that bras could be causing major breast problems, and because of this lymphatic impairment, and that could lead to cancer. In fact, recent research confirms something that they knew back in the 30s, which is lymph stasis, or stagnant lymphatic flow, causes cancer and increases cancer rates. And that's whether it's damaged by surgery or by trauma or by tight clothing. If you impair your lymphatics, you're impairing your immune system, and you can't fight cancers, and you can't clean up your tissue, and disease and cancers can result. So go ahead.
Sorry, but going back then to your original book, the first publication, some of those connections with the lymphatic system and cancer are researched and known, but the fact that bras might be constricting the lymphatic system or may be responsible for cancer is something you studied specifically. You didn't actually study the lymphatic system, right?
That's correct. What we ended up doing was we assumed if bras are a problem, and they are causing this problem, then if we looked at women with and without breast cancer, we should see different bra wearing patterns. And that's what our first study was about. And between 1991 and 93, we did the U.S. bra and breast cancer study, the first of its kind in the world, where we looked at bra wearing habits and behaviors and how they related to breast cancer incidence. And there were about almost 5,000 women that we interviewed in 5 major U.S. cities. About half of the women had breast cancer. And what we discovered was that the tighter and longer the bra was worn, the higher the rates rose. A bra-free woman has about the same rate of breast cancer as a man, which is about 100th the rate of women. 1 man for every 100 women is the ratio for breast cancer incidence. So bra-free women and men have about the same rate. And when the longer and tighter you wear your bra, the higher the rate goes, to where women who never take off their bras, basically, 24/7 bra users, their rates are about 100 times higher than a bra-free woman. So that's what our findings were. And we got that published in Dress to Kill by Avery Publishing Group in New York. And the world was pretty much in shock. But the good news is Soma's lump went away when she stopped wearing a bra. And we discovered that nobody really looked at this. It was shocking.
Amazing to us. That the first thing you would do if you have foot problems is look at your shoes, right? The first thing you do if you have lung cancer is look at, well, what am I breathing? Smoke, asbestos, something that's getting into my lungs. First thing you should do if you have breast problems is, what am I doing to my breasts? Am I squeezing them to death? And that's literally what women are doing, we discovered. And it's something that, as a woman, from your first training bra when you're 10 or 12 years old, you are basically trained to wear this tight band around your chest every day of your life, not think about it, not complain about it. Try not to feel too uncomfortable about it, because you're not even considering the option of going without one. It's sort of it's something that women have been just conditioned to feel they need a bra, and they don't.
And since we came out with our first study, and the book came out in 1995, we since went back to Fiji, and we discussed this now in the second edition, where we update everything that's happened since 1995. We confirmed this with a Fiji study where the Fiji government was very excited when we came, because they said this explains why our working women are getting breast cancer now. They never had this problem before. And they never had bras before. But now that they got westernized, about half the women were wearing bras who were the working women, and they were the ones getting breast disease.
So you come out with this book in 1995, and just to be very proper and academic about this, the correlation you found between bra wearing and breast cancer is a clear one. The causation, though, of course, is a hypothesis. You don't know without further research, medical research, whether that's in fact what's causing it. But the correlation seems solid. It's not a very small percentage you're describing. It's a very significant difference. So what was the reception like? Why I have not heard any of the Canadian Cancer Society or the American Cancer Society issuing warnings about bra wearing.
They're more like issuing warnings to ignore this and just come for mammograms. I think I wanted to also mention that it isn't just correlation. I mean, the hypothesis of the causation, yeah, it's true. It's more than a hypothesis, though. Back in the 30s, they knew that lymph stasis causes cancer. They even knew that bras were causing cancer. We found that Dr. Mayo, who started the Mayo Clinic, he wrote in 1931 in the Annals of Surgery that breast cancer is a problem in, quote, civilized cultures where women wear clothing on their breasts and bras, and that when they're basically top-free, in cultures where they're top-free, they don't have these problems. So he recognized the clothing contribution to the creation of this disease, and they knew about the lymphatics. There was even a 1950 patent that identified bras as causing, it says bras are commonly recognized as causing breast cancer because of their constriction. So it really had to be rediscovered, and that the lymphatics are very much a part of immunity, and you impair them, you're impairing immunity, and then you can't fight cancer cells. And that's what they're discovering now in the dermatology field, especially. This year, in 2018, there are new studies coming out showing that any impairment of lymphatics increases cancer rates because it's immune suppression. If you're suppressing the lymphatics, you're suppressing immunity. And the thing is, they have not connected tight clothing. I mean, that's our contribution, is bringing in the issue of constriction from clothing. And the problem is, and this is why the cancer industry, the Canadian and American cancer societies didn't respond to this except with disinterest and then suppression, as we can talk about. But this isn't part of their normal way of thinking. When they think of cancer, they're willing to model cancer on rodents or in dogs or in tissue culture. They think of mammary glands as interchangeable, so they could model in a mouse tumor line that gets tumors for genetic reasons. They could consider that a model for human tumors in the breast. And of course, women's breasts are nothing like.
And rats don't wear bras.
Yes, exactly. Right. So you have to incorporate culture, which is our contribution as medical anthropologists. Is we realize that the things you do to your body because of your culture will alter its physiology. And when you think about it, it's like obvious. And I think naturists particularly appreciate how clothing can be a problem. And so this is really our contribution, is to say chronic clothing constriction can cause lymph stasis and all of the diseases associated with impaired lymphatic circulation. And that for the breast, I mean, cancer is the tip of the iceberg because that's the end disease. Before women get cancer, there's millions and millions and millions who are suffering from breast pain and breast cysts, and the cysts are filled with this lymph fluid that can't properly flush out of the breast. So this caused by the bra, the leading cause of all this breast disease, is the constriction from this garment, which the medical model doesn't consider. So to them, this is an out in left field concept. It sounds like pseudoscience. Let's just reject it because there is a lot of pseudoscience out there. And some things that the public, they don't realize is ridiculous and it doesn't make any sense. So medicine said, this makes no sense. And we were explaining lymphatics, but the only thing doctors do with lymphatics is they remove them. They remove the lymph nodes. And that's causing lymphedema with women, and men, especially after breast surgery. Men get it too, of course. But after breast surgery, they remove the armpit lymph nodes and their arms swell and their chest swells. And they're told don't wear any tight clothing or tight jewelry because it could further impair your lymphatics. And of course it can before you have your nodes removed as well. So medicine's relationship with lymphatics is not to recognize it as a crucial part of the immune system's circulatory pathway, but as the way cancers spread, let's remove the lymph nodes. It's also the way cancers are fought, and that's the problem. And they're learning that now. They're realizing even surgical scars are increased cancer rates because it impairs the lymphatics. Any trauma to your tissues impairs lymphatics, especially removing a lymph node, but because that's like a nexus for all of these vessels, and then they don't have a place that they normally drain to, and everything backs up, and then your tissues just deteriorate, increased everything, swelling, increased bacterial infections, fungal infections. You can't deal with the infections because your immune system isn't working. So these people are miserable the rest of their lives, and there's nothing that could be done except, ironically, wearing compression bandage to squeeze the lymph out. But then, of course, if you're constantly compressing your tissue or it's going to balloon out, then how is your tissue ever going to get circulation? So they're like, they become doomed to lack of circulation once their lymphatics are impaired. So the best thing is to realize that the clothing we wear is one of the leading causes of this impaired flow. And it's something that we can prevent.
And it's not just with the breasts, it's other places too. Anything tight on the body is going to squeeze and compress your vessels and interfere with circulation.
You had a very clear correlation. You have, you say there's new studies that have come out and other studies and other information that's out there. Yet the National Cancer Institute says that bras have not been shown to increase a woman's risk of breast cancer. The American Society states there are no scientifically valid studies that show wearing bras of any type causes breast cancer. That's a quote. And a study apparently conducted by the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center found, quote, no aspect of bra wearing, including bra cup size, recency, average number of hours a day worn, wearing a bra with an underwire, or age first began regularly wearing a bra was associated with risk of breast cancer. How do you explain this? Why is this out there? Why are they not
looking at the evidence that you have?
Well, that's a good question. It's because it goes against what their agenda is, which is to get women to come for mammograms and not to feel complacent that if you just stop constricting your breasts with bras that you're going to be, breast cancer free. They're selling mammograms with fear. So I think they don't want to endorse other preventative measures, especially until they figure that it's really true. And how many studies is it going to take for them to figure it's really true is an interesting question. When it came to lung cancer and tobacco, it took 30 years of denial, of research that was accumulating. And doctors still supported smoking. They still sold Camel cigarettes. And you could do a YouTube search on doctors prefer Camel, and you'll see these doctor ads, So, and then it took 7,000 studies before the U.S. Surgeon General would make the declaration that tobacco causes lung cancer. 7,000 studies. And they did it on a Saturday when they made the announcement, so it wouldn't affect industry as much during the week. So it's like when you're dealing with a big industry, I was even told by the American Cancer Society directly. I spoke with David Sampson, who's their communications director and has publicly opposed the bra and breast cancer issue. I spoke with him, and he said, he's been resisting my work for 20 years now. And, he said that the bar is really high for this because before you can talk about bras causing breast cancer and create all the turmoil to industry and to women that would involve, they're going to need a whole bunch of studies.
Which they don't want to do, it seems.
Well, the cancer industry is funding some of their research now. There's money from the bra industry is funding cancer research. So they have a say in it. They're encouraging research that's into genetics and things that people can't really change about themselves that require maybe pharmaceutical interventions, and that's the normal thing of doing. But the American Cancer Society told me they got flack for just raising the age recommendation for mammograms from 40 to 45, and they got a huge amount of flack from the industry because they don't want to turn away women who are 40. That's a lot of women. So they get attacked for anything that challenges
status quo.
The status quo, and people who are making money treating, detecting, and dealing with this and selling bras.
And the bra industry is absolutely huge. Over 1 million bras a day are sold just in the U.S. And that's a lot of money and a lot of power.
And they're donating. So the American Cancer and Canadian Cancer Societies, they rely on donations. They don't want to shock the public. They want to come up with ways to detect and treat cancer, not necessarily to identify a cultural cause that's ubiquitous, like wearing bras.
And free.
And it makes, it's free. It doesn't cost anything to do this. And it challenges a huge number of industries. So there's a lot of pressure on them. And I think part of the problem now is because they've come out so adamantly against this link. I mean, the real question to me is, why not do more studies? Now, if they did, they'd be legitimating this as an issue that needs research. So they ended up commissioning, the National Institute of Health commissioned this study at Hutchinson that you cited when you read that there was a study done. That was done in 2014 at Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center. And it was designed not because this was considered a legitimate research question, but because so many people are believing it that they felt it needed to be demonstrated that it's not true. So the study they designed only included lifetime postmenopausal bra users. Every woman was over 55, and all of them wore bras, so there was no bra-free control group. Now, to put that into perspective, Stefan, that's like studying lung cancer and its link to cigarette smoking and looking at lifetime smokers who are older than 55 and not having any comparison group of non-smokers, and ask, okay, does it matter if they smoke 2 packs a day or 2.5 packs a day, whether they got cancer, and in this group of lifetime smokers, and you find that, well, we couldn't see any difference, therefore smoking doesn't cause lung cancer. I mean, it can't. Now, there's all these other studies that are, at least 30 that I know of now, that are showing a bra and breast cancer link. And they
And,
should be.
and what are people saying? What are the cancer societies or the people who oppose you saying about all those studies? How do it's one thing to ignore your study. How can they ignore all the other ones?
Well, they use the statement. There's no, what was their way of putting it? There's
Valid.
no
They're
valid
invalid.
studies, or
somehow they're invalid.
right.
Like they're not up to their standards.
Well, it's by
Whatever.
implication. They're not saying why. They're not saying these other studies showed this, but the methodology was flawed because of this.
No, they're not giving any specific reasons.
No, they're just saying there's
They're
no
just-
valid studies that show this, and then they wipe it. They're just ignoring it. And I don't know how they're going to admit that they were all of these years of resisting this has harmed women. I mean, how are they going to say we're right at this point? So they're sort of invested, and that's why I think these things take 30 years, because the people in power who have established their statement on this, their position, they're the hardest people to change. I mean,
They'll never admit
they
they're
put their
wrong.
careers on the line. So you have to wait until they retire, and there's a new guard of people with new way of thinking that understand the lymphatics, and that they're necessary to keep them flowing, and that clothing can interfere with that. Of course. So in my opinion, their answer should be, we need more research. A study showed no, but it had no control group, and these studies say yes. So I'll tell you, there was something else they did that you didn't read. They don't like to promote this one, but they do sometimes. Back a few years before that 2014 study, the American Cancer Society tried this pseudo study where they looked at women whose armpit lymph nodes were removed surgically from melanoma, from skin cancer. And they had their armpit lymph nodes removed. And they said, okay, if lymphatic stasis causes cancer, then we should see increased cancer rates in these women, increased breast cancer in these women who've had their lymph nodes removed. And they looked at the numbers, and then they were very small numbers. And they said we couldn't find any. But they did admit that skin cancer went up 700%. And interestingly, they published this as a letter to the editor in the American Cancer Society's own journal called the Breast Journal. And there was an article in the New York Times about this, but it was only a letter to the editor. They didn't include all the data. And as I said, it actually supported that lymph stasis causes cancer, because skin cancer rates went up 7-fold.
And they admitted that they didn't have enough
There weren't enough
data to
to really make a valid statistical conclusion on the breast cancer issue, because they were talking about a handful of women. Plus, it's not a very good model. Starting from a girl, becoming constricted, and her lymphatics never properly develop because of the bra. And then after 20 to 30 years of constriction and chronic lymphedema, she develops tumors. That's a different model than you remove the lymph node and let's look 3 to 5 years later, which is what that study did. And it was like a pseudo study, which is ironic because they complain that my research wasn't peer reviewed because we were ignored. We had to go to a book to release it to the public. It was like they weren't interested. But theirs wasn't peer reviewed. This was a letter to the editor. And then the Hutchison study a few years later, because that letter didn't squash the issue. And they concluded, continue wearing your bra. There's no evidence to show, even though this is preliminary and we really can't draw big conclusions from this, it's obvious that you should be able to wear your bra, continue to wear it. And by the way, the American Cancer Society, I'm not sure if the Canadian one does too, they sell bras. They sell mastectomy bras. And so their idea is to, even after you've had your breasts removed, you want to look like a normal woman and not feel stigmatized. So you should be able to dress in a bra like other women and look the way everyone else does. So their goal is really the normalization of cancer. Not necessarily, and certainly not challenging the cultural causes of cancer that could rest within industry, some of which are donors to their cancer society. So that, in a nutshell, is really the dynamic. And it's not limited to bras and breast cancer. It's everything. Last week, there was an article about how the National Institute of Health, in doing research on the link between alcohol and cancer and disease. They accepted money from the alcohol industry. They actually solicited the alcohol industry to pay them through foundations that were on the side, so it wasn't even obvious where it was coming. This was in the news, legitimate mainstream news last week. It passes real quickly because it's such an embarrassment. It should be big headlines. How NIH solicited money and told them the results were going to be favorable to their industry as a result of their donations. And this has now been outed, and that's the National Institute of Health. So when they work with Fred Hutchison on a cancer study with bras, let's come out and show the public that this isn't true. By the way, another thing that's interesting is Fred Hutchison raises money, ready for this, with bra runs, a 5K bra run, where you're supposed to wear a bra on the outside of your clothes and run in it to raise money for their cancer research. It's going to be really hard for them to come out with a study that says bras cause cancer.
It is I'm not qualified to evaluate all the scientific literature on this, but it makes a lot of sense to me. The way that something similar to me is sun exposure and skin cancer, because in the 90s it was all about sun is bad, it causes skin cancer, you should live in a cave basically. And I kept finding, and a few others, studies that suggested that sun exposure might actually prevent skin cancers in some cases. And the cancer societies refused to ever even look at those. And still to this day in Canada and the US, they say basically that all skin exposure is bad. But the Australian Cancer Society, the country which has the highest rate, by the way, of skin cancer, actually recommends moderate sun exposure as being an important part of health and cancer prevention. That's an official statement that they have, an official position statement, which I'll put in the show notes. So this sounds a lot very familiar what you're doing and what you're experiencing. What I saw in the 90s with sunshine and what we're now seeing, that's very different.
Well, there's a huge skin products industry and sunscreen industry. I mean, that's a multi-billion-dollar industry too. Mm-hmm. So whenever, I know another researcher who's dealing with food issues and contamination of food coloring with heavy metals that the FDA allows. And she was telling me she used to be an FDA researcher and toxicologist, and they fired her for exposing this and deny it. And they are, she said the answer is the U.S. government, at least, I'm sure Canada's the same, doesn't like to challenge industry. And, normally when you're dealing with research, every study needs to be duplicated. All studies should be copied. And one of the crises in science now is it's very hard to copy studies. They were saying that psychology studies, they're never copied and never replicated. And 90% of the time when you try to replicate it, you get different results that don't say the same thing. So science should always be, there's always a give and take. You're supposed to be trying to prove yourself wrong. I mean, you're not supposed to be using science for political advocacy or for commercial advocacy. But unfortunately, that's what's happened to science. And, now look at this, the way they're dealing with the bra and breast cancer issue. They've polarized it to where it can't be true. I mean, they're just so, when you see words like, the way they're dealing with it in black and white, this is wrong, it's false, it's pseudoscience, we're not interested in these other studies, do not believe this. You're not dealing with it scientifically. You're dealing with the politics of this and the economy, which is a political issue, and who's being affected by these conclusions. Now, by the way, the bra industry who has a lot to lose from this, obviously. They're adapting by coming up with better bras. In fact, there are at least half a dozen newly patented bras whose patent says it was because of lymphatic impairment, that their bra is better for your lymphatics, and they cite Dress to Kill and our research, our names, as the reasons for their new patent. And the sales of push-up and underwire bras have plummeted. And the bralettes, which are these like nothing bras, it's almost like a camisole, and sports bras, which unfortunately can be constrictive, but they're not as bad as underwires, their sales are zooming. And bra-free is becoming extremely acceptable with the Free the Nipple movement and top freedom advocates. And just in general, young people are questioning everything about society, and they're wondering, why do we have to wear a bra? This is oppressive. It's not comfortable. Why can men show their nipples and I can't? And those are now legitimate questions. Back in 1995, when we first came out with this, if I would have talked about bra-free, everyone blushed. If you would say breast massage, you might as well be, X-rated already. Now we talk about all of these things with impunity. The culture has become much less prudish, which I think is a good move in the right direction. And I think that's aided the increased realization of what we're talking about. And people are willing to say, yeah, this is like common sense. Of course you don't want to wear a tight bra. I hate it.
So you now have Dress to Kill. 1995 was the first edition, and 2017, 2018 is now you've launched a second edition, not just a reprint of the original Dress to Kill book.
Right.
Why now? What's new? What changed?
Well, there's been a lot of research since our original study. As Sid was saying, there's at least 30 other studies all around the world that are confirming what we first discovered, and a lot of experience that we've had between then and now, dealing with the opposition, dealing with women who are fearful and hesitant. That's a whole nother issue, is how women are dealing with this. Half the women we tell this to say, well, of course, oh my God, it is tight, and they'll immediately take it off and get rid of it. The other half cross their arms over their breasts and say, oh my God, there's no way I could go without my bra. They are so addicted to it, so conditioned to feel they need it, that they can't go out in public without having correctly shaped and lifted breasts.
And over the years, we've had a lot of experience dealing with women about this, and we put those experience, some of these, in the new book. So the reason for the new book is new research that we bring up. We also, with the internet, the first book in 95, it wasn't as powerful through the internet to discover research from the past. But then we uncovered how they knew about this, and we talk about this ever since there have been bras. For example, in the 1920s with the flapper era, and women had the boyish haircuts, small breasts were in fashion, and women would actually bind their breasts. They would push them down with the garments that they were wearing, the bras.
Smaller. That's
to make them look smaller.
Fashion.
And doctors were decrying that, saying this is causing cancer. So that was way back in the 20s and 30s. And then bra designs changed over time to be a lift instead of a compress. And then the underwires and all sorts of things have been changing. And we talk about that. We talk about the problems with bra sizing, that there is no rhyme or reason to how they do it. And we talk about, we sort of do a little bit of an expose of the cultural resistance from, including conversations we have with the American Cancer Society and the Wikipedia page that somebody set up to criticize our work, that doesn't allow any edits that are favorable, even references to new studies. It's like, the people that are opposing this have a coordinated campaign of misinformation, calling the link a myth. And we've been fighting that for 25 years. It's become a life mission for us. And it takes that to do the kind of thing it takes the kind of commitment and dedication that we've been giving this without any economic gain. We work for a nonprofit. We're doing this because we're truly trying to reform the culture out of this disease.
Did you have any trouble finding a publisher?
No. In fact, interestingly, the publisher that we used is the same one that did the first edition. the same man with a new company. He was actually bought out by Penguin Putnam, the original Avery Publishing, for the original edition. And then we didn't get our rights to print for like 3 years. And the book was sort of squashed. We still wonder if that buyout was in part to squash our book, because the cancer and lingerie industries are really, really, really worried about this. And we've been followed by them, and every move we make, they try to put out the fire, and to figure out how they can keep this issue under wraps. And it's been a journey, and that's what we talk about in the new edition. In addition to describing our original study, our original reasoning, so it's the original brought up to date, and for 2018, and new stuff is coming out even now with like the lymph stasis causing cancer, which is one of the key things they said. They said the lymphatics aren't blocked by bras, and even if it was, that doesn't cause cancer. And you'd have to. One doctor actually stupidly said, you would have to have, what was it, the weight of an elephant stepping on your breast in order to block the lymphatics, which is insane. I mean, some of the statements, and some of the statements, by the way, are interesting. I don't know if you know this, Stefan, but the way I discovered the way it works in some media, like a magazine, I think it was Redbook, they had an article that came out that said bras do not cause breast cancer, and they cited a doctor who said that studies have shown that there's no link. And at that point, there was still nothing opposing this, not even the Hutchison study. I contacted that doctor and I said, what study refutes studies? You say in plural. What was done that refutes this? I need to know. I mean, that's my field. I want to know if what's going on. He said he didn't even know what I was talking about. He gives the publisher the right to use his name for a quote. They make up the quote and they use his name. So when you're reading things out in the media, it's really hard to believe what's going on and the kind of shenanigans that happen. That's, in the name of with doctors' names and, studies that are done to refute something that deliberately don't include a control group. I mean, all sorts of underhanded, shady practices. And it's, and it's not just limited to this. This is one of the major problems with our healthcare system and in general. These types of simple lifestyle solutions that challenge the cultural status quo are suppressed because they're shock to the system, even more of a shock than the disease that's being caused by it. There was an interesting example of suppression started right from the beginning. Before the book was even published, the first time in 1995, my publisher was approached by the Intimate Apparel Council, which is the trade association for the lingerie industry based in New York. And they contacted him. First, they lied about my credentials, saying I never went to the schools that I went to, Duke University and University of Texas Medical Branch at Galveston and stuff like that. He checked into it and he confirmed, of course. Then they threatened him with a lawsuit if he would publish. And they never sued. He said, it'll be great publicity. They never sued, but that was the beginning of the battle. And as I said, he was bought out in 1998. And then he started a new company called Square One Publishers. He wasn't allowed to publish health books for 3 years. I mean, he was one of the biggest alternative health publishers before the buyout. And then he started Square One again, and now he's doing health books. And I've really felt, not indebted, but really appreciative that the publisher, Rudy Scher, was willing to go out on a limb and publish the book despite the resistance and despite the concept being new and challenging. And he writes about that in the new book. He writes a preface from the publisher, which he never does, explaining the situation of what he faced, that never in his career of doing all sorts of health books and everything, has he had that experience of suppression of the information and a reaction from industry? We have another thing in the book, which is a foreword by a doctor. His name is Dr. Sadeghi. He wrote an article for Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop magazine. He's actually her personal physician. And Gwyneth Paltrow is bra-free much of the time, and she understands the health issues. And he wrote this article for Goop and was chastised for, and the article was in a question. The title was, "Could underwire bras cause breast cancer?" And he evaluated the field and talked about the studies and was, I think it was a good article. And then it was too good, apparently, because it went to millions of her viewers, Gwyneth Paltrow's list of subscribers. And then he got threats for his license and all sorts of negative response. Online, he was just crucified for resurrecting a debunked myth about bras and breast cancer. The anger about just talking about it. And I've seen that too. Other people have been trying to get me to speak at the universities about this issue with the new book and trying to share this information, let women know about this. And sometimes they're met with outright hostility for suggesting that there be a talk about this. It's as though it was a political issue and you're dealing with Democrats and Republicans. And and you're getting this just venomous response, like how irresponsible it is for you to even talk about this and mislead women. This is pseudoscience, this is fake news, ignore this. And they're angry that anyone will bring it up. But then they just have to go to Wikipedia and they'll get confirmed in their opinion, or see the American Cancer Society saying, oh, there's no studies that support this, no valid research. And one study, which was not really valid, said no, there's no link. Therefore, that's the final word on this. Wear your bras, but make sure you come for a mammogram so we could find your tumor and treat you early.
Now, so to be fair, though, we should say that Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow have been criticized for some pretty outrageous health claims or health treatments, right? I mean, so, but I guess that doesn't mean everything in there is crazy. But she is known as being pretty extreme in what she suggests.
Well, I'll tell you something. The first thing that came out for Dress to Kill ever was in the National Enquirer. So, they bought advanced publication rights in 1995 and did a 2-page, very good spread on this. They gave the good details. They got some doctors that supported it, and it was great. That was the National Enquirer, which says there are UFOs and, abominable snowmen. So, yeah, unfortunately, in our culture, either you're mainstream or you're fringe. And if you're going to be fringe, you're going to have a lot of strange company. Right. And, so that's the way it is. And yeah, Gwyneth Paltrow, but that's why they're open-minded, because they've already opened their eyes to the fact that the mainstream is what it is. It's not necessarily correct. It's not necessarily good for you. It's what we're being sold. And oftentimes it's not good for you. And a lot of people have opened their minds and eyes. And unfortunately, there's just certain venues for ideas. Like I've been on Coast to Coast, which is a hugely popular alternative show that does all sorts of weird stuff. But I've been on them for like 3-hour shows several times and talking about all of my theories, because we do other work besides bras and breast cancer. And it's a receptive audience. Then you try to talk to mainstream, and they'll just shoot you down, because they're vying for control over people's minds and the way they think about things, and they don't want somebody like me having a voice.
Soma, you were talking earlier about talking to women about not wearing bras, and so instead of us two men talking about that, I'll ask that question based on what I've been told by women. Some women say their breasts are large and to not wear a bra is very uncomfortable, even painful. What do you say to that?
Well, I understand completely. When I first decided to give up my bra, of course, I had incentive. I had a lump. I wanted to try it to see if it would help. It was difficult because I had been trained to wear a bra since puberty. Basically, I'd been wearing a bra 30 years every day of my life. Now, to suddenly go without one, I felt naked. I felt, oh my God, people are going to stare. They're going to notice that my breasts aren't the way they should be or in the right position or the right whatever. And I was very, very self-conscious. Women are trained to be this way. It took me a while to get used to it. I was afraid to go out in public for the first week or two, but finally it got more and more comfortable. And especially when I noticed that the lump was getting smaller, it certainly got more comfortable. But within a couple of weeks, it felt so much better to be without a bra.
What about large breast versus smaller?
Well, I had large breasts, and it's like you said, it's harder for large-breasted women because if they're that uncomfortable, it's just because they're adapted and addicted to wearing it, and it just takes time. They have to give it some time. When you're large-breasted, a lot of that is fluid retention from the bra, basically making your breasts heavier and droopier. And when you get rid of the bra, that swelling will slowly go away. Your breasts will lift and get more firm and more comfortable, and you can breathe easier, move easier. It's such a relief. It's so liberating, but it does take time, especially if you've been wearing a bra constantly every day of your life. It takes time, I admit.
But if you haven't been wearing a bra,
then you're in good shape.
We've run into women who are large-breasted who've never worn a bra, and they never complain, oh, I need a bra.
No, of course not. And women in Fiji, when we went back to Fiji to do our follow-up study, we were questioning women about their bra wearing there. And some women with very large breasts not wearing a bra, we asked them why they don't wear a bra. And they said they can't wear a bra because they're too big. It's too uncomfortable. It's too tight. So it's definitely a cultural thing, and it's based on what you're used to.
So a lot of it is psychological.
Oh, totally psychological. It's not physical at all.
I have to again. I have no experience, but I've been told by women in naturism who, while they are in naturism, don't wear a bra, that it can be because they're heavy that they actually have physical pain.
That's because they've been wearing a bra.
Right.
I mean,
the pain goes away after a couple of weeks of going without, and the fluid retention diminishes.
Well, let me give an example.
Aren't as heavy anymore.
Let me give an example. If you put your arm in a sling and had it in a sling since you're 10 years old every day, even until you went to sleep, and then after 30 years of that, you took your sling off, your arm all your ligaments would be so weak that it would hurt to have it out of the sling. So it's not that your arm needed a sling, it's that the sling made it weak. So if the breasts are in a bra with this artificial support constantly, the internal suspensory ligaments in the breast, the Cooper's ligaments is what they're called, they become very weak. They don't have the effect of gravity to strengthen them. The pull of gravity is important. Pull is important for ligaments. If you immobilize the body and you don't allow pull on a ligament, it weakens. So these women who are large-breasted, if they're really large-breasted, you should look at their shoulders when they take their bra off. They have deep grooves from lifting those breasts that are heavier because of fluid from the lymphatics being impaired. They lift them up, and that puts the pressure on their straps, and they have deep grooves that cut down on the nerves and cause compression injury to the nerves going down the hands, creating numbness and tingling in their hands. There's research that shows that. It causes neck pain and back pain. And headaches. There is no reason to want to lift big breasts. Let them reach the center of gravity on your body where they're comfortable. That's the way your body is. And if you never wore a bra, you would not be standing naked in pain. If anybody is standing naked in pain because of gravity pulling on themselves, they're already diseased. They've suffered from the bra. And if they get rid of it, they'll take time as their ligaments strengthen. But once they do, they will have completely different breasts. They'll never be able to put a bra on again because they'll say, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. How did I ever wear this thing? That's after a month. We've been doing bra-free studies. In fact, right now we're doing a very important study, which we've come to the naturist community for because, we met naturists back in 1996 with Lee Baxendahl, who is the founder of the Nature Society. He's gone now, but he invited us to speak at a conference in Lupin Lodge back in 1996, and that's the first time we got introduced to naturism. I mean, a lot of naturists they're attracted to the naturist lifestyle, and then they realize then learn how bad clothing could be for health. In our case, we learned how bad clothing could be for health, and then got attracted to a naturist lifestyle, which we happily live here in Hawaii. We are coming to naturists because we've started an international bra-free study, and women around the world are joining the study. It's totally free. All we're asking women to do is stop wearing bras, or if they've been bra-free, to keep on being bra-free. And then we'll keep in touch with these women for long term, over the years. We're hoping that in 10 years, this group of women will be like this, compared to the regular society where women are wearing bras, will have so much lower breast disease and breast cancer rates. And we'll make this group of women available as well for other researchers who are doing breast cancer research, so there can't be any excuses for not including a bra-free control group like they did in that sham study. And so that's why we're hoping that naturist women appreciate the benefits of being clothing free and the hazards of clothing, so that they would be willing to join this study. And it's right now it is taking off. There's a lot of women that are in the study, and they're very happy. They're reporting how their breasts are feeling so much better once they stop wearing bras, that they lift and tone, that your breasts are really swollen, not in a good way. It's not like you want. In fact, there are some bras that boast, you wear this bra, it'll give you bigger breasts. How do you do that? You do it by cutting off the lymphatics enough to make the breasts swell. It's not a healthy thing. So when women stop wearing bras, their breasts don't swell so much. So that's the answer to the big-breasted question.
So Soma, you said you're large-breasted. What about exercise? Like we do a 5K run, and women with large breasts say they have to wear a bra while they run. Is it possible?
Okay. A couple of different ways of looking at that. Yes, if you feel like you absolutely must wear something to support your bouncing breasts, then do so, but take it off right afterwards. Just like a man with a jock strap is going to, need it for certain exercises, but he doesn't wear it constantly. So take it off right afterwards. That's fine. But, when I first gave up my bra, I was doing some rebounding, some jogging, and I felt a little uncomfortable, almost painful with my breasts bouncing. So I would hold them as I was doing that. But that was only for the first few weeks, first month or so. Afterwards, it felt wonderful having my breasts bounce. And now I can go for a little jog or do all kinds of bouncing types of things. And it feels wonderful to have them bounce like they're meant to, And I think once your breasts are healthy, you don't need any kind of support for anything. Well, also, if you're a large-breasted woman, you might want to consider, if you need to do exercise regularly, to do things that are less bouncy. Do some yoga, stretching, swimming, bicycling, things that don't require a lot of bounce. And that would make you feel a lot more comfortable.
Because this is radio and nobody can see you, and so people, women, can understand what you're talking about. Can you tell us what size your breast is?
Wow. If I were to wear a bra,
yes.
I guess I would wear a 36D, something like that. I mean, it's not a double D, triple D like some women, but That's about the size. And yes, I do sag. I've nursed 4 children, and that takes its toll because of all the stretching. But now when I go out in public, yeah, my breasts aren't perky like a 16-year-old. But you know what I've realized is nobody notices, number one. Few people may be noticed, but if they do, they don't care. And number 3, they're my breasts, my body, and I feel comfortable and happy the way they are. I feel proud that I am bra-free, and I'm an example to other women that they should do it too. And in our community here in Hawaii, at least 50% of the women don't wear bras anymore. So it's happening. And I think more and more women are going in that direction. Once they try it, once they get through the first week or 2 of discomfort, they can't go back.
So I agree with you that, as we should accept our bodies as we age, and we should be proud of what we are. But of course, that's a big concern. Women, think that a perky breast is a prettier breast for whatever reason. Do you think that breasts will sag more if you don't wear a bra?
Not at all. Just the opposite. At least with premenopausal women, it's been shown that going without a bra actually allows your body to firm, lift, and tone. And there's been a study to that effect in France recently. I forget his name, but Rion, Dr. Rion. And he was studying this for over 10 years and showed that women who did not wear bras had firmer, perkier breasts.
Well, he showed that the breasts actually lifted.
Lifted and toned. That's over the years. So the whole perky breast thing, it's understandable. Women want to try to look young. That's why they dye their hair and wear makeup and all of that. And I understand they want a youthful figure. And if their breasts aren't where they, quote, should be, they want to wear a bra to lift them into the right position. I can understand that. But fashion should not be more important than health. I think as women try being bra-free, you might try it on a weekend when you're not going out, so you don't have to worry about how you might look. Try it and then expand it into a week and then 2 weeks. You'll discover that not only are you so much more comfortable without a bra, even if your breasts aren't exactly as perky as you'd like them to be or hope that they might be, you'll realize that if you love yourself and the people around you love you, it doesn't matter, that your body is your body and we're all unique in every way. And having your breasts up in a sling that holds them into the right position and shape is not necessary. And in fact, by giving that up, you realize that your body is beautiful the way it is. And it improves your sense of well-being physically and emotionally. And I think that's the most important thing, is to be real, to be you, to be free and liberated from this contraption that we've all been brainwashed into thinking we need, but we really don't.
So I will have links to all the things we talked about and some of the things I talked about in the introduction in the show notes. If you want to read the history on Wikipedia or any of that, all those links will be on the show website, which of course is now naturistlivingshow.com. Easy to remember. It's our own website. And if you want to send comments, I'm always looking forward to receiving comments. The old email works, but the new email is contact@naturistlivingshow.com. I always appreciate reading them, and I do read them all, but I don't always have time to reply to everybody, so I apologize. If you have a question I don't answer it may be that I read it too quickly, feel free to send it again. I won't take it personally. I won't think that you're being too persistent or annoying. You can also call and leave a comment, and I will include those comments if they're interesting or valuable. So I'm not promising I'm going to use it, but I will listen to it. The show's phone number is country code 1, area code 905-473-6060. Or if you're in Canada and the U.S., you can call 1-888-373-9124. Or you can Skype Bear Oaks, because the Naturist Living Show is, of course, located at Bear Oaks. And all those will get you into the Bear Oaks phone system, and the show is at extension 333. You can take as many tries recording your comment as you want, and if you're not happy in the end, you can even delete it. So there's no risk in calling in and leaving a comment. So thank you once again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and that you'll join us again for the next episode of the Naturist Living Show.
This episode of the Naturist Living Show was brought to you by Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park. Traditional naturist values in a modern setting. Traditional values means that naturism is more than just taking your clothes off. It is a life philosophy with physical, psychological, environmental, social, and moral benefits. Bear Oaks Family Naturist Park strives to promote those naturist values in a modern setting that provides the amenities and services that our members and visitors expect. Free your body, free your mind. Learn more at www.bearoaks.ca.